Here we are talking with the man himself, Fabien. So obviously we have a million questions about this.
Yep.
Like it's a conversation starter.
Yeah.
So it's really heavy.
Yeah. 23.
It's 4-bar instead of the same pivot design.
Yep.
So have you had the chance to ride this yourself? Were you part of the testing process?
Well, I actually been part of the chart that was in the process of designing this bike, and after that I did more than 200 runs on this bike to actually do all the different versions that we pre-designed. I really feel that we are at a point of the industry where we had been through many suspension system, kinematic, and many direction, and a lot of the trend has been bringing brands in some direction and other, and I felt like it was really important moment to kind of settle our design and try to really isolate different things to test, like in terms of wheel pass, of compression ratio, anti-rise, anti-squat, to be able to properly understand what was the best combo we were looking for and what would actually bring us the ideal situation with the global level of technology we have nowadays.
So I was really surprised when the graphs and the numbers came out.
Yeah.
Because it seems like a lot of bikes have been moving towards really low anti-squat and really low anti-rise.
Yeah, yeah.
And especially in anti-rise, this has a pretty high value.
Yep.
So what's the thinking behind that?
Well, the thing is, like, you have a lot of people that think, like, in terms of anti-rise, you want like to optimize the traction in the pure functionment of the suspension, which is the case on most automotive or moto style. It's what you're looking for to keep the wheel on the ground and the braking, which I think it completely isolate an issue into our sport, where the actual masses is the body of the athlete a lot more than the machine itself.
Yep.
And the off balance that anti-rise create when it's in terms of braking is actually generating more issue than pure suspension functionment. So that's why, in my preference, I really decided to go on very high numbers to be able to keep the stability of the chassis, which also goes behind the choices that we have done through the kinematic and the axle wheel pass that we have on the Sender 3.
So how would rider position and braking points be different on a bike with higher anti-rise versus a bike with really low anti-rise?
Well, you just have to look the dynamic sag. Basically, under a braking phase, if you put the data acquisition, you will go with a very low anti-rise. You will quickly identify that you will be higher in the travel, create more traction, but you also have the same effect on the front, which will actually increase the fork diving and the issue of transferring the masses on the front and unstabilizing the rider. So my whole point of that, and again, it's the whole story behind this chassis, is to get the center of gravity of the athlete in every phase in the best position he can, so the riding capacity and abilities of the athlete are enhanced a lot more than the pure functionment of the suspension itself.
Okay. 4-bar versus, I guess you'd call it a single pivot axle path.
Yeah, you can call it this way. Like the thing is, like, when we isolate the MX Link already on Sender 1 first version, we really trying to isolate the functionment of the kinematic and the compression ratio itself. So the ability to have those two different systems within the bike allows us to really, I would say, fine tune the compression ratio versus the kinematic itself. And this is an advantage that we try to keep over Sender 1, 2, 3.
So how much of a role do you think just the pure axle path difference between, like, because that's a very high 4-bar arrangement, right? Like it's going to have a lot of rearward axle path.
Yeah.
How different is that going to be from the dedicated single?
Well, the thing is like what we are looking for is, like, especially on the first third of the travel, to kind of avoid the rocking of the chassis and stabilize the athlete without losing the traction effect that you will have from the wheel path. So having fairly bit of rearward axle pass really help us to find the right compromise in between those two. And this is something that we really achieve in terms of understanding with the mule itself, because of all the different adjustments that we have been able to do.
Okay, I heard 58 pounds, which is something like 22 kilos or something, right?
Yeah.
Does that feel terrible or does that feel sweet? It doesn't feel awesome.
You know, I've been racing for 30 years. And when I was actually racing back in the days, I have been world champ with 23 kilo bikes. So I have to say that the first time I jumped on the bike, I was like, wow, we're miles away of what we're racing nowadays. But the value that we have been developing have been actually quite in line with the expectation that we had once we go to the very first prototype of the Thunder 3. It feels awkward, but to be honest, especially with e-bike racing and stuff like that, it was not feeling terrible. It was actually bringing us a certain amount of stability, even if the maneuverability stability is a different story. But I would say the hardest work was not for the athlete, but mostly for the suspension, because like you were blowing through the travel. If hydraulic was not there, it was really hard compromise to find.
Okay, and anything that, like, are there any questions I haven't asked that I should, or something that you wouldn't know about this bike by looking at it?
Well, like the thing is, like it was part of the whole process. This bike was not aimed obviously to perform. Like we never went against the clock with this bike and another bike. We went against the clock with this bike in one version and this bike in the other. So it was all part of a global process that hopefully give us for the next 5 years like an amount of data that will help us obviously on development of the Center 3, but also develop a certain competence, knowledge and know-how how to process in the future on new products.
Okay, can I ask you a non-Canyon question?
For sure, 100%.
So back in the day,
Yeah.
on the Kona,
Yeah.
flipped links.
Yeah.
Do you know how high that bottom bracket was? Because it looked really, really low.
Like we were at minus
330 or
in Monsenan, not Monsenan, in Livigno. The year I won with the inverted rocker, we were at minus 25 compared to the wheel axle. Which nowadays we are at -5, -10. So that was really low. But then on the other hand, I had
but
lots
that's minus 25 with 26-inch wheels.
Yeah. No, it was close off the ground. But if you remember that track, I went there for testing. There was a lot of chattery, but nowhere where we really had issue of pedal exposure. So I tried to optimize the masses really low. But I also at the time had a 59.5 at angle. Which was like super slack, very first long bike as well. And the whole point was to gain stability for me to charge. The suspensions at the time like had really, really little amount of low speed, but a lot of high speed. And Jack, that is Loic Mechanic now, was behind my setup. And it was all about trying to keep the height of the suspension, but again, keep the geometry where it needed to be for me to charge and optimize the grip on the wheel. And to link that to the Canyon we develop, I'm a big believer on Geo for one reason, is that I think still now the heavyweight is the athlete and the skill of the rider is still super important. So whatever bike you have, if you actually put the bike in the right setup for the rider to be placed at the right spot, then the racer will go fast. And I think this is more than crucial, even beyond suspension settings.
So I just did the math in my head, by the way. Minus 25 is about 310 millimeters in bottom bracket height, which is on the floor. So, okay, so back to Canyon. I just thought of another question that I wanted to ask, which is, if you're building a bike with very relatively high anti-rise in the braking, are there any other kinematic decisions that you want to pair with that? Or is it good independently?
No, that's 100% right what you're saying. And that was the whole point of this product. Is like, obviously we isolate every parameter to try to make our decision, but you still have one parameter that influences the other, and anti-rise is one of it. It will affect BB height because it will affect dynamic sag, and all that has to be combo in the best manner. That's why the test mule was a huge advantage to try all those combo together. And no, you're totally right. That would not work with any bikes.
Yeah, because I want to say it has a relatively high bottom bracket. I want to say it's like 350 or something.
But there is a reason to it.
Yeah, exactly.
With the reward axle pass plus the anti-rise, it's something that you have to anticipate when the bike is functioning compared to when the bike is static. And this is all combo and things we tested, and this BB height could be adjusted when we did the test, and that's a part of the global package.
Okay. Did you talk about doing adjustable chainstay length? Because I think that's something that's
we
been
did.
offered.
We did. It was something that we were into it, and we quickly realized that for racing, it's something that we were using barely never.
Okay.
So that's why we came down to the option when it came to the design to try to get rid of it, to optimize our kinematic, because we realized that yes, front center is something that was crucial for like the reach, the stack, the possibility of the head angle. But at the end, the chainstay one was not something we were using a lot. So that's why we got rid of it. Okay,
and I'm going to ask you to pick favorites.
Yep.
Of the team members, who's your favorite for product testing?
That's a good one. I'm actually, the way we process is I do 80% of the development and I do the last 20% with our athletes. But we have very, very different profiles. I would say Troy is very unique on his position, where his masses are, and his expectation from the bike.
In what sense? Like how?
In one sense, you will notice that Troy has his legs really straight up. He has his center of gravity really towards the front, where he would use very softer suspension and demand a lot of hydraulic to keep the height, but very soft spring force so he can keep traction. And he rides a lot more like a cat than you will see Henry and Luca charging a lot more with the legs a lot more flexed and a center of gravity that's more towards
rearward.
the back. And riding with a lot more commitment in terms of G out. So those two profiles are very different, and I would say Troy is very, very picky on what he's looking for, when the two other riders are more with strength. So I would say in a way a bit easier to satisfy and to understand.
Yeah, because I remember in the Fox Dialed series when Luca was on
Yep.
the Syndicate, he was sort of infamous for never changing anything.
But I have to say that things has changed since he came around. I really try, our role and my role is to also try to get a certain competence, but also know-how to the athlete, without saying educate them, but make them aware of the process it takes to fine-tune what they want and what they look for. So I really try to create the dialogue between the athlete and the engineer. And also the mechanics, because I have the chance to kind of understand the two worlds, and that really helped me with those guys to create real bridges with them, the mechanics and the engineers, to be able to understand further what is happening with the bike and them and the ground, to fine-tune their bikes and understand better what do they exactly need to perform.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, that's all my questions. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure,
today.
always a pleasure, guys.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Thank you.
Enjoy the weekend.
Yeah.